He wasn't dying, but it sure felt like it. For nearly a decade, Ethan Blake walked through life with a strange, invisible weight pressing on his chest. Not a physical pain, at least not one doctors could find, but a sense of disconnection, like watching the world through a foggy window. Every morning, he'd wake up, stare at his reflection, and ask himself the same silent question: what is wrong with me? And for 10 long years, no one, not his doctor, not his therapist, not even his wife, could give him an answer. Blood tests, brain scans, sleep studies, clean. Vitamins, meditation, diet overhauls, useless. But the truth wasn't in a lab or under a microscope. It was sitting in a sealed plastic box on his kitchen counter, labeled Ancestry DNA. And the truth was bigger than anything he was prepared for. Before we go further, let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt like something just wasn't right? Like you were living someone else's life, or carrying a burden you couldn't explain? Maybe it's a nagging emptiness, a feeling you don't belong, or a piece of your story that never quite added up. If you've ever had that feeling, even once, this video is for you. Because what happened to Ethan didn't just rewrite his past. It flipped everything he thought he knew upside down. And if you stay with me to the end, I promise you, you'll understand why a simple DNA test turned into a life-shattering discovery. I know the internet is full of clickbait titles and over-the-top thumbnails. But this isn't one of those throwaway stories that leaves you with nothing but regret and ads. This one hits different. It's real. It's raw. And trust me, when we get to the final twist, you're going to want to sit down. Because it's not about the science. It's about identity, family, secrets that stretch across generations. And the moment when one man, just like you or me, finally saw the full picture of who he was. Or who he wasn't. So, stick with me. Don't skip. Don't scroll. Because every second of this story matters. And the answer you came here for? The thing that's been eating at Ethan and maybe eating at you too? You're going to get it. But not all at once. We're going to walk this path with him. Every discovery, every whisper of truth, every betrayal, until it hits you like it hit him. Some answers cost more than you're ready to pay. But knowing changes everything. Let's go back to the beginning. Ethan was the kind of guy you'd pass on the street and not think twice about. Mid-30s, average build, soft-spoken, worked a corporate job in logistics, married with 2 kids. Lived in a quiet suburb outside of Denver, where every house had a lawn that looked like it came from a Home Depot catalog. Nothing about him screamed mystery. But underneath that well-manicured exterior was a man haunted by something he couldn't name. Not depression exactly. Not anxiety. Just off. Like a puzzle missing a corner piece. And for years, he chalked it up to stress or the wear and tear of adult life. But deep down, he knew better. There was something else. It showed up in strange ways. He'd stare at old family photos and feel disconnected, like a stranger crashing someone else's Thanksgiving. He'd listen to stories from his parents about when you were a baby and feel like they were talking about someone else. And when he looked into the mirror, really looked, he could never shake the feeling that the face staring back at him didn't quite match the name he'd carried his whole life. His wife, Jenna, noticed it too. At first, she thought it was burnout. Then maybe a midlife crisis creeping in early. But even as she watched him slowly detach, avoiding eye contact, shrinking from family gatherings, falling silent at dinner, she never imagined the real reason was something genetic. Something hidden. It was Jenna, actually, who ordered the test. Not for Ethan. For fun. She'd seen a YouTube ad, maybe the same one you've seen, about discovering your ancestry, connecting to your roots, tracing where your people came from. It was trending. Ancestry reveal videos were all over social media, from TikTok to Instagram Reels. People crying when they learned they were 20% Scottish, 30% Nigerian, or had Viking heritage. She thought it would be a cute Christmas idea, so she bought 2 kits, one for her, one for Ethan. He barely reacted when he opened it. Just smiled politely and set the box aside. For weeks, it sat untouched, until one Sunday afternoon, out of sheer boredom, he spit into the tube, sealed it, and dropped it in the mailbox. That decision, small, casual, meaningless at the time, set off a chain of events that would explode everything he believed about his past. Now, before we go further, let me stop and ask you something real. Do you trust the people who raised you? Do you believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that your story, the one you've been told your whole life, is the truth? Most of us do. We take it for granted that our parents told us the whole story. But what if they didn't? What if, buried under layers of love and protection and secrecy, there was something else? Something they chose not to say, not to hurt us, but to hide something they couldn't face themselves? When Ethan's results came back 6 weeks later, nothing about his ethnicity shocked him. The percentages looked pretty much like what he expected: German, Irish, a sprinkle of Eastern European. But something else did catch his eye. A strange name under close DNA matches. Someone listed as a parent/child connection. Except it wasn't his mom. And it definitely wasn't his dad. He stared at the screen, confused. The name was unfamiliar. Robert Langley. Age, 64. Location: Austin, Texas. There had to be a mistake. He called Ancestry's support line. Maybe they'd mixed up his sample. Maybe he'd clicked the wrong profile. The rep, polite but firm, explained the data didn't lie. DNA doesn't lie. The match was real. This man, this total stranger, shared 50% of his DNA. He wasn't just a cousin or a long-lost uncle. He was Ethan's biological father. Imagine sitting at your kitchen table, holding your phone, and realizing your father, the man you called Dad for 36 years, isn't biologically yours. That everything, every hug, every bedtime story, every fight, every memory, is suddenly shaded by this invisible fracture. Ethan didn't know what to think. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there, frozen, staring at that unfamiliar name as the ground beneath him shifted in a way he could never explain. Now, if you're still with me, and I hope you are, this is where things get even more complicated. Because Ethan didn't run to his parents. He didn't confront them. Not yet. Something held him back. A quiet voice in his head saying, "Don't rush this. You need more." And that voice that might have saved him from emotional collapse. Because the deeper he dug, the more twisted the truth became. He looked up Robert Langley online, basic Google search. There he was, a retired air traffic controller, divorced, no kids listed. Lived in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Austin. Normal, harmless looking. But one photo caught Ethan's eye and made his stomach lurch. Robert was standing next to an old pickup truck, smiling, hand on the shoulder of a woman Ethan had never seen before. But it wasn't the woman that hit him, it was Robert's eyes. Blue. Piercing. And they were Ethan's eyes. Not metaphorically. Identically. The nose. The jawline. The posture. It was like looking into a time-warped mirror. And just like that, the fog Ethan had lived in for years started to lift. Not because he had the full truth, but because for the first time, he knew where to look. But what he found next, that's when everything spiraled. You see, this wasn't just a story about mistaken identity or secret adoptions. It was something deeper. A buried decision made decades ago. A lie told to protect. Or maybe to control. And when Ethan finally confronted his parents, when he sat them down and showed them the match, the silence that followed told him everything. That's where we're heading next. What they said. What they didn't say. And how one man's search for the truth tore open wounds that were never meant to be exposed. But I want you to sit with this moment for a second. Really sit with it. Because if it happened to Ethan, it could happen to anyone. And in just a minute, you're going to hear the words that changed his life forever. Words that will make you question just how well you really know your own story. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He tried, God, did he try? But every time he closed his eyes, that stranger's name echoed in his mind like a broken alarm clock that wouldn't shut off. Robert Langley. A name that should have meant nothing. But now, it carried the weight of everything Ethan didn't understand about his own life. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Jenna breathing softly beside him, and tried to untangle the 1,000 questions swarming his mind. If Robert was his biological father, then who was the man who raised him? Why had no one ever said anything? Had his whole family known? Had they all just chosen to lie to his face for 36 years? Or had they believed the lie themselves? By morning, Ethan looked like he'd aged 10 years. His eyes were sunken, his face pale, his hands shaky. Jenna, unaware of the emotional earthquake that had struck overnight, greeted him with a smile and a cup of coffee. It took everything in him not to blurt it out, not to drop the mug and shout what he'd discovered. But instead, he played it cool. Numb almost. He needed time. Space. He wasn't ready to speak it aloud because once he did, there was no taking it back. So he told her he didn't feel well, that he might have caught something. She kissed his forehead, told him to rest. But rest wasn't an option. Not anymore. He drove for hours that day, nowhere in particular. Through back roads, side streets, empty highways stretching toward the horizon. He stopped at a gas station, stared at his reflection in the convenience store mirror, and wondered who was actually staring back. There had been signs over the years, little things easily dismissed in the moment, but in hindsight impossible to ignore. His blood type never matched what his parents claimed. He'd always been the only one in the family without allergies. Even his temperament fell off. Quieter, more introspective, prone to bursts of restlessness that no one else seemed to understand. At family reunions, he was the odd one out. Polite, but disconnected. Like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. He'd always chalked it up to personality. Now, he wasn't so sure. And then there was his mother. Ethan had always had a complicated relationship with her. Warm, but guarded. She loved him. He never doubted that. But there had always been this strange, unspoken distance between them. Like she was holding something back, a part of herself she didn't want him to see. Growing up, she was the kind of mom who showed love through acts of service. School lunches, folded laundry, perfect birthday parties, but never much in the way of emotional vulnerability. Anytime Ethan asked about his early childhood, her answers were oddly rehearsed. "You were born during a snowstorm," she'd say, every time, like it was a script. "Your father rushed home from work just in time to drive me to the hospital." But when he'd ask follow-up questions, what hospital? What time? Who was the doctor? She'd deflect or change the subject. At the time, he thought she was just forgetful or distracted. Now it felt like something else. Like fear. And then there was the photo. Tucked away in an old box of childhood keepsakes was a picture Ethan had found years ago, but never thought much about until now. It showed his mother, visibly pregnant, standing next to a man who wasn't his father. She was smiling, but the man looked nervous, almost rigid. Ethan had asked her about it once, and she quickly said it was taken at a friend's baby shower, someone else's party, someone else's story. She'd even laughed. But now, the way she'd yanked the photo from his hands, folded it sharply, and shoved it back into the box took on a whole new meaning. What if that man was Robert Langley? The deeper Ethan dug, the more unsteady the ground beneath him became. He started looking into timelines, when his parents met, when they married, when he was born. According to the family narrative, Ethan had been a honeymoon baby, born exactly 9 months after their wedding day. But the dates didn't add up. His birth certificate listed a hospital in a different city than the one they were supposedly living in at the time. He found an old address on one of his school records that didn't match the family home. It was little details, scattered and buried, but they were everywhere. Clues hiding in plain sight. And all of them pointed to the same chilling possibility. His mother had been hiding something for decades. But what haunted Ethan more than the lies was the reason behind them. Why would two people, his mother and the man who raised him, go to such lengths to conceal his true parentage? What could have happened that was so devastating, so irreversible, that it demanded a lifetime of secrecy? Was it an affair? A one-night stand? A mistake that spiraled out of control? Or was it something darker? In the days that followed, Ethan found himself watching everyone in his life through new eyes. His father, well, the man he thought was his father, seemed distant. Detached, but in a different way than usual. There was a stiffness in his voice when they spoke, a carefulness that Ethan had never noticed before. Almost as if he knew the storm was coming. And then there was his Uncle Mark, his mother's younger brother, who had always been unusually protective of Ethan. As a kid, Ethan remembered Mark slipping him extra birthday money, sneaking him out for ice cream, always stepping in when his father got too stern. At the time, Ethan thought he was just the cool uncle. But now he wondered, did Mark know something? Was he shielding Ethan all these years, not just from punishment, but from the truth? Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that more people were in on it than he realized. He started digging into public records, trying to trace Robert Langley's movements during the year he was conceived. What he found raised more questions than it answered. Robert had lived in the same city his parents lived in for a brief period in the late 80s. He had worked at a local airport, just 10 miles from the small accounting firm where Ethan's mother had once been a receptionist. There was even a company newsletter scanned online, a black-and-white PDF from 1987, where both their names appeared in the employee section. Robert Langley and Melissa Blake. Not just strangers. Co-workers. Colleagues. Possibly more. Now the pieces weren't just suspicious, they were forming a picture. But it wasn't clear yet. Just fuzzy outlines, shadows in the fog. And then came the strange phone call. Late one night, Ethan's cell rang from a blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was low, raspy, unfamiliar. An older man. "You need to stop digging," the voice said, flat and emotionless. "Some truths do more damage than good. Let it go." Then silence. Ethan sat frozen for several minutes, phone still pressed to his ear long after the call ended. He hadn't told anyone outside his immediate circle about the DNA match. So who knew? Who was watching? And what exactly did they want him to stop uncovering? From that point on, he couldn't shake the paranoia. Was it just a prank? Someone who had access to his search history? Or was it connected to Robert Langley directly? Maybe Robert didn't want to be found. Or worse, maybe someone else didn't want him to find Robert. It was around this time that Ethan started noticing things that didn't quite make sense. His mailbox left open when he hadn't checked it, a car idling at the end of his street for too long, a friend of his mom's suddenly reaching out after years of silence just to catch up. Little things, easy to dismiss. But when stacked together, they formed a pattern. Something was happening behind the scenes. Something that didn't want to be exposed. But the deeper he went, the more Ethan realized this wasn't just about who his father was. It was about why his real identity had been buried. About what that identity threatened to reveal. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one with a secret. Because there was something else. A second match on his Ancestry results that hadn't made sense at first. A woman, around his age, listed as a half-sibling. Her name was Elena Monroe. Lives in California. No connection Ethan could immediately place. He clicked through her profile. She'd taken the test just 3 months before him. No photo, no bio, no messages. Just the stark label. Half-sibling. And that one label opened a door Ethan never expected, because if Elena was his sister, then who was her mother? The mystery wasn't narrowing. It was expanding. And as Ethan stood on the edge of uncovering the biggest truth of his life, he had no idea just how many lives were tied to the secret buried beneath his own. What happened next will change everything. Ethan didn't sleep for days after discovering Elena Monroe. Every waking moment, his mind looped around her name, her city, the impossible connection that now tethered them together. He sent her a message through the Ancestry platform, a polite introduction, casual enough to avoid sounding desperate, but direct enough to get her attention. Days passed. No response. He tried again. Still nothing. Then one afternoon, when he least expected it, her name popped up in his inbox. Not with a reply, but with a system message. This user has deleted their account. No explanation. No warning. She was just gone. Like she'd vanished into thin air. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Had she seen his message and been scared off? Or had someone scared her off for him? He tried to backtrack, search through cached pages, internet archives, any scrap of information tied to Elena Monroe. But it was as if she'd scrubbed her digital footprint clean overnight. Her email bounced back. Her social media accounts, if they were ever real, no longer existed. Every thread unraveled in his hands. That same night, Ethan returned to the Ancestry site only to find his own account temporarily suspended for unusual activity. He submitted appeals, called customer support, begged for an explanation. But all he got was a robotic response. Your request is being reviewed. Weeks of research, gone in an instant. It felt deliberate, calculated. Feeling trapped, Ethan turned to the one person he'd always trusted most with his secrets, his childhood best friend, Marcus. They had grown up on the same street, shared every awkward teenage moment, survived college together. Marcus was grounded, analytical, the kind of guy who could always see straight through a situation. Ethan explained everything. Robert Langley, the DNA match, the eerie phone call, the vanishing half-sister. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes, nodding as though the pieces were making sense. At the end of the conversation, he leaned back and said something Ethan hadn't considered. What if you're not just dealing with family secrets? What if it's legal? Inheritance? Property? Someone stands to lose something if you find out the truth. That hit Ethan like a cold slap. Until now, he'd only thought about it in terms of personal betrayal, lies told to protect pride or reputation. But what if the stakes were financial? Or worse, criminal? Maybe the man who raised him wasn't just hiding an affair. Maybe he was hiding something that could dismantle his entire life. The theory made Ethan's stomach turn. And Marcus, usually the skeptic, seemed convinced enough to start helping him dig. They poured through local court records, land deeds, wills, anything that might tie Robert Langley to Ethan's family. That's when they found the buried lead. In 1990, just 2 years after Ethan's birth, a quiet legal dispute took place over a piece of farmland in eastern Pennsylvania. Nothing major, just a contested will between two unnamed parties. But one of the attorneys listed on the documents was the same man who handled Ethan's parents' estate planning for years. A coincidence? Maybe. But it didn't feel like one. Determined to get answers, Ethan drove to the lawyer's office under the guise of updating his own will. The man, now retired but still sharp, welcomed him with polite formality. For an hour, they danced around small talk and logistics. Then Ethan leaned forward and dropped the question like a loaded weight. Do you remember working with a Robert Langley back in the early 90s? I came across your name in a public record. The man's expression shifted, just for a moment. A flicker of recognition, immediately buried beneath professional detachment. That name doesn't ring a bell, he said flatly. Must be thinking of someone else. But Ethan knew he wasn't. He pressed again, more carefully this time, hinting at his own situation without revealing too much. The lawyer's tone turned cool, dismissive. Some questions are better left unanswered, son, he said, then stood up to signal their meeting was over. Ethan left the office with a pit in his stomach. Someone else had just told him to stop looking, and this time, it came with a warning that felt personal. Things escalated from there. His laptop, which had all his notes and login credentials, suddenly crashed one morning. The hard drive was fried beyond recovery. At first, he assumed it was a freak accident, until Marcus's computer died the same way just 2 days later. They hadn't shared anything publicly, hadn't posted a single word about their search online. But someone was still watching. Someone with resources. Ethan began to wonder if he was in over his head. And then his mother called. It was late, almost midnight. Her voice was trembling, not with fear, but with something worse, guilt. She said she needed to talk, that it was time. Ethan's pulse spiked as she asked him to come over. When he arrived, she was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red from crying. She led him into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of wine. The silence was crushing. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. I have to take this, she whispered, stepping outside. Ethan waited. 5 minutes.
10.
15. Then the sound of tires screeching down the road. Things escalated from there. His laptop, which had all his notes and login credentials, suddenly crashed one morning. The hard drive was fried beyond recovery. At first, he assumed it was a freak accident, until Marcus's computer died the same way just 2 days later. They hadn't shared anything publicly, hadn't posted a single word about their search online. But someone was still watching. Someone with resources. Ethan began to wonder if he was in over his head. And then his mother called. It was late, almost midnight. Her voice was trembling, not with fear, but with something worse, guilt. She said she needed to talk, that it was time. Ethan's pulse spiked as she asked him to come over. When he arrived, she was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red from crying. She led him into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of wine. The silence was crushing. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. "I have to take this," she whispered, stepping outside. Ethan waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then the sound of tires screeching down the road. He ran outside, heart pounding. She was gone. So was her car. Her phone left behind on the porch swing. And all Ethan could do was stare into the darkness, wondering what she'd been about to confess, and who didn't want her to say it. As the days passed with no word from his mother, Ethan's sense of unease morphed into something darker. It wasn't just that she had disappeared. He realized she had vanished at a crucial moment, just before revealing something he desperately needed to hear. But there was another piece of the puzzle that seemed to make the situation even murkier. One afternoon, Marcus called him, his voice low and urgent. "You need to meet me. Now." The cold panic in his tone was unmistakable. Ethan didn't hesitate. He jumped into his car, mind racing with all the possibilities. Could something have happened to Marcus, too? Was he caught in whatever web had trapped his mother? When Ethan arrived at Marcus's apartment, his best friend was pacing the floor, his face etched with worry. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, trying to mask the tightness in his chest. But before Marcus could respond, he handed over an envelope, simple, unmarked. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The handwriting on the front was familiar. It was his mother's. But when he opened it, he found nothing but a single sentence written in bold, frantic letters. "Stop digging, or your mother's next." The cold dread washed over him like a tidal wave, drowning out every rational thought. He turned the envelope over, desperate for more clues. But there was nothing else. The handwriting, although his mother's, was shaking, erratic, as if written in a moment of extreme fear. Ethan stared at the words, feeling the weight of them press down on him, suffocating him with an unspoken threat. It was clear now that whoever was behind all this didn't just want him to stop searching. They were willing to use his mother as leverage. But just as quickly as the panic set in, another thought slipped into his mind. Who else is involved? A twist of suspicion coiled inside him, and he realized something that had never crossed his mind before. What if Marcus wasn't as innocent in this as he had always seemed? What if Marcus had known more than he let on about his family's dark past? Was it possible that the friend he trusted most had been playing a role in the secrets that were starting to surface? Ethan stared at Marcus, watching his friend's face carefully, searching for any sign of guilt, any clue that he might have been hiding something. Marcus noticed his gaze and looked away, his eyes darting nervously. "I don't know who's behind this, man," Marcus said, his voice shaky now. "But we have to stop this before things get worse. This isn't just about your family anymore. Whoever's involved, they don't care who gets hurt." Ethan nodded, trying to ignore the nagging doubt that had started to creep in. Marcus was scared too, but was it possible that fear was simply a cover for something darker? Something that had to do with his own history, something he had never shared with Ethan? The possibility gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside. There was no time to unravel that particular mystery, at least not yet. As Ethan tried to make sense of what was happening, another twist appeared, one that brought him no closer to answers, only more confusion. One evening, while scrolling through his email, he found a new message in his inbox. It was from an unknown address, with the subject line, "You were never meant to find this." Ethan opened the email with trepidation, unsure of what it might contain. Inside, there was an attachment, nothing more. He clicked it. What appeared on the screen wasn't a photo, or a video, or anything that could have been expected. Instead, it was a set of scanned pages from what appeared to be an old, faded journal. The first few lines were blurred, but the words Ethan Langley stood out clearly. The name was unmistakable. The journal entry detailed a family secret, a long-lost relative who had been swept under the rug, someone with ties to a forbidden past. But just as Ethan began to process the information, a sharp knock on the door broke his concentration. He froze. It wasn't just any knock. It was deliberate, slow, calculated, as though the person on the other side knew exactly how much time Ethan needed to read those words before interrupting. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, Ethan quickly closed the email and shoved his laptop into his bag. The person at the door wasn't Marcus, or anyone else he expected. It was a man he had never seen before, with cold eyes and an air of authority that immediately put Ethan on edge. He was wearing a suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his face unreadable. Without introducing himself, the man handed Ethan a small envelope. "You don't want to make the wrong decision here," he said in a low, even voice. "This investigation? It's bigger than you think." Then, without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away. Ethan stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. The envelope felt heavy in his hands, like a weight he couldn't escape. Inside the envelope was another clue, another piece to the puzzle that was slipping further and further out of his reach. But this time, it wasn't just a threat. It was a map, pointing to a location in the middle of nowhere, a property that was linked to his family, a place he had never heard of. This new lead made his blood run cold. It wasn't just about family secrets anymore. It was about something far more dangerous, something buried so deep that the people behind it were willing to go to any lengths to keep it hidden. Ethan stared at the map, the looming sense of doom tightening around him. Whoever was behind this, whoever was trying to stop him, had just made things much more complicated. There were forces at play here, forces that didn't just involve him or his mother. There was something much bigger at stake. Something far more dangerous. And if he didn't act quickly, it might be too late to stop it all from unraveling. But just before he could make a decision, Marcus called again. His voice was frantic, almost hysterical. "Ethan, get out of there. I don't know how, but they're coming for you. You need to leave. Now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed the map, shoved it into his jacket pocket, and ran. But as he made his way to the door, he couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's warning was just the beginning of something far worse. The lines between ally and enemy were starting to blur, and Ethan had no idea who to trust anymore. As Ethan drove through the streets, heart pounding, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He had barely processed Marcus's urgent warning before his phone buzzed again. Another message. This time, it was from an unknown number. The message was short, cryptic. "You're not safe anymore. Leave now, or it's too late." His pulse raced. His hands gripped the steering wheel with a desperation that had only grown in the past few days. He had felt the pressure mounting, the invisible eyes watching him, but now it was clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to let him walk away. They weren't just threatening him. They were actively hunting him. Ethan glanced nervously at his rearview mirror. It was almost impossible to shake the unsettling feeling that someone was following him, tailing him through the winding streets of the city. He took a sharp turn, hoping to lose whatever car might be behind him, but his paranoia only seemed to grow. Every street corner, every shadow seemed to conceal someone watching. He knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a coincidence. It was part of something far larger, far darker. The realization hit him with a crushing weight. He was no longer just uncovering family secrets. He was in the middle of something dangerous. Something deadly. His phone buzzed again, this time a call. Without thinking, he answered. "Hello." His voice was shaky, the tension in his body making it hard to focus. "It's me, Marcus." The voice on the other end crackled. "Listen, I don't know how much time we have, but you need to get out of the city. Don't go home. Don't go anywhere familiar. They know where you are. They've been watching us for days." The call cut out abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He redialed, but the line was dead. No signal. Nothing. His gut told him that whatever Marcus was trying to warn him about, it had already escalated into something he couldn't control. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message was far more sinister, and it chilled him to the bone. We have eyes everywhere. Your friend's already gone. Don't think you're next. The words burned into his mind as the real horror of his situation set in. Marcus was gone. Whatever had happened, whoever was behind this had already taken the next step. It was no longer a distant threat. It was here, it was real, and it was closing in on him. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he made the decision to pull over, stopping at a gas station just outside of town. He needed to think, to clear his head. But as he sat there in the car, staring out at the empty parking lot, the sense of dread only deepened. He felt it now, the cold weight of someone watching him, the flicker of headlights in his peripheral vision. He wasn't alone anymore. His phone buzzed again, an unknown number. His fingers shook as he answered, voice trembling. Hello. The voice on the other end was muffled, distorted, but still unmistakably male. It sent an icy chill down Ethan's spine. You thought you could keep digging, didn't you? That you could uncover the truth without consequences. But you've crossed a line now. A line you won't come back from. There was a pause, a heavy breath. You're not going to like what's next. We've been watching you. Watching everyone you've ever trusted. It's already too late. The line went dead before Ethan could respond. He stared at the phone in his hand, his mind racing.
Who was that?
Who was watching him? The pieces were slipping out of his grasp, and with each new message, each new threat, the walls around him closed in tighter. He had thought this was about family secrets. He thought it was a mystery to solve. But the more he uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about his family, it was about something far bigger. Something he wasn't supposed to know. Ethan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again, and his stomach dropped. A black sedan had pulled into the gas station parking lot, its headlights casting long shadows across the lot. The car was parked a few spaces behind his own, its engine running. The driver wasn't visible, but Ethan could feel the weight of their gaze. He didn't need to see their face to know that whoever it was, they were waiting for him to make the next move. He couldn't stay here. He couldn't stay anywhere. His life had been upended in ways he couldn't have imagined, and the deeper he went, the more dangerous it became. His thoughts spun. What had Marcus meant? Why had he said to leave the city? Ethan glanced at the map he'd found in the envelope earlier, the one that had led him to this point. It had been taunting him all day, a destination marked in red ink, drawing him closer to whatever dark truth lay hidden beneath it. Maybe that was the only lead left, the only way out. But the question was, would he make it there alive? As he prepared to drive off, the car behind him shifted. The engine revved low, its headlights flaring. Ethan's body tensed, a deep, instinctual fear washing over him. They were closing in. There was no escape. He was trapped. Without thinking, Ethan slammed the car into gear and sped out of the parking lot, tires screeching as he raced through the streets. He could see the black sedan in his rearview mirror, following closely. Every sharp turn he took seemed to be mirrored by the car behind him. It was no longer a pursuit, it was a chase, and Ethan was running out of time. His heart pounded in his chest as adrenaline surged through his veins. He knew that if he made one wrong move, it would be over. The truth, whatever it was slipping away from him. But the deeper he went, the more danger he faced. And now, it wasn't just about finding the answers, it was about surviving long enough to uncover them. The dark sedan closed the gap, and Ethan's thoughts raced. Was Marcus still alive? Had he been taken? Or worse, was he part of the game all along? Who could he trust? The questions kept swirling in his mind, but there was no time for answers. Only action. His phone buzzed once more. The message was simple, chilling, and cryptic. You can't outrun us. And that's when Ethan realized the terrifying truth. He wasn't just uncovering family secrets anymore. He was running for his life. As Ethan's car swerved around a corner, narrowly avoiding a collision with a truck, he realized that the black sedan wasn't just following him, it was intentionally hurting him toward something. His heart raced as he floored the accelerator, desperate to break free, but the sedan's headlights grew ever closer. He had only one thought in his mind: escape. He didn't care where he was going anymore, he just needed to lose them. The city streets blurred around him, a dizzying whirl of neon lights and looming buildings, but despite his best efforts, the sedan stayed right on his tail, as though it was never going to let him go. But then, just as he rounded another sharp corner, his phone buzzed again, a loud, insistent vibration that nearly startled him out of his seat. Hesitant, Ethan glanced down at the screen, bracing for another cryptic threat. But this time, the message wasn't from an unknown number. It was from a name he hadn't expected to see: Lauren. Lauren had been the one person who had always supported him, the one person he had trusted unconditionally. She was his closest friend, someone he'd turned to for advice in the past when things felt uncertain. Her name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she had found something. Maybe she had the answers he was so desperately searching for. He pressed accept, hands shaking as he brought the phone to his ear. "Lauren, what's going on? You've got to help me. I don't know what to do anymore." The voice on the other end was calm, too calm, considering the chaos he was in. "Ethan, I think it's time you knew the truth." His stomach dropped. There was something in her tone, a coldness, that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "What do you mean, the truth?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything you've been chasing. It's all been a setup. All these clues, the messages, the threats, it was all designed to lead you to this moment. To make you think you were uncovering something you were never supposed to know." She paused for a beat, and then the words hit him like a punch to the gut. "I was the one who put the envelope in your hands, Ethan. I was the one who started all of this." The phone slipped from Ethan's grasp as he struggled to comprehend what Lauren had just said. The world around him felt like it was unraveling. The person he had trusted the most, the one who had always been by his side, was the very one who had set this entire nightmare in motion. His mind raced, 1,000 thoughts crashing together in a blur.
Why?
Why would she do this? What was her angle? As he picked the phone back up, his voice faltered. "You set me up?
Why?
What do you want from me?" Lauren's voice remained eerily composed. "I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan. But you needed to know the truth. You needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. This whole thing, your family, your heritage, your father, it's all part of something far bigger than you can even imagine." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, a sense of betrayal suffocating him. "What are you talking about? I don't understand any of this. I thought you were helping me." "I was," Lauren replied, her voice steady. "But now you need to listen carefully. Your father wasn't just a victim of his own secrets. He was part of something far darker. And you're a part of it too. But you weren't supposed to know. Not like this. It's not safe for you anymore, Ethan. They've already found you." The words echoed in his mind as panic gripped him. "Who's they? What's going on?" But before she could answer, the call ended abruptly, and Ethan was left staring at the dead screen in his hand, the sound of his racing heart filling his ears. It was impossible. He couldn't wrap his mind around it. Lauren, the person who had stood by him through everything, had been orchestrating this entire chaos from the start. And now, in the space of a single phone call, everything he thought he knew had shattered into pieces. His grip tightened around the steering wheel as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. But there were no answers. Only more questions. Why had she been so involved? What was the secret behind his father's death? And why had she pushed him to uncover the truth, only to pull the rug out from under him at the last second? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that every piece of evidence he had uncovered, every twist and turn in the case, had been carefully crafted to lead him exactly where he was now, on the edge of a precipice, about to fall into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Then it hit him. The envelope. The map. Everything he had thought was a clue was a carefully placed breadcrumb, part of a larger game he hadn't even realized he was a part of. It wasn't about his family's past. It was about something deeper, something far more secretive. But what was it? Who could he trust now? And how far did Lauren's betrayal go? In the rearview mirror, the black sedan had disappeared, but the chill of uncertainty settled over him. Was he still being followed? Or had they merely allowed him to escape for a reason? The questions multiplied, but there was no time to find the answers. Suddenly, The sound of a familiar voice pierced through his thoughts. "Ethan, look out." Before he could react, his car swerved, a figure darting in front of him. The world seemed to slow as he slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop just inches from hitting the person. His heart stopped. The figure standing there, barely visible in the dim light, was someone he never expected to see, someone who had been presumed dead. The man was his father's old business partner. And now, standing before him in the middle of the street, he held the final piece of the puzzle, the answer to everything Ethan had been chasing. The question was no longer what happened, but who's pulling the strings? The truth was darker, more twisted than anything Ethan had prepared himself for. Ethan's hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing in overdrive, spinning in a million directions. The man standing in front of him, his father's former business partner, was not just a ghost from the past. He was the key to everything Ethan had been trying to unravel. The world around him felt like it was collapsing in slow motion, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum as his heart hammered in his chest. The man's face was grim, his expression unreadable, but Ethan could see the weight of the situation hanging in the air between them. "You've come this far, haven't you?" The man's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "You know too much now. They'll come for you, just like they came for your father." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "What are you talking about? What does all this mean? What happened to my dad? He died and you..." He paused, fighting to keep his emotions in check. "You were the last person to see him, and now you're telling me he wasn't just some random victim of some accident?" The man's eyes softened for a brief second before they hardened again. "Your father got in over his head. We all did. You think the messages, the threats, the secrets, it's all some coincidence? Ethan, your father was involved in something far darker than you could ever imagine. Something much bigger than any of us." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt the air around him grow thick, suffocating. He had been chasing answers for so long, uncovering piece after piece of a puzzle he didn't fully understand, only to find out that the whole time, he had been walking down a path that his father had carved out before him. The man standing before him wasn't some bystander. He was part of the puzzle, part of the web of secrets that had slowly entangled Ethan's life. But now, standing there with his mind spinning, Ethan realized just how deep the deception went. "You're not the only one they're watching now," the man continued, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "They've been keeping an eye on you for months. They know you're looking for answers, and they know that once you find them, it's over. For you, for everyone. So here's your choice, Ethan. You can walk away. Drop everything. Go back to your life. Forget all of this. Or you can keep digging. But if you do that, there's no coming back. Your father made his choice, and now, so, do you." The weight of the decision hung in the air like a leaden curtain, suffocating him. Walk away? How could he? All these years, all the questions, all the mystery surrounding his father's death, he couldn't just turn his back on it now. The truth was out there, and he needed it. He deserved it. But at what cost? His safety? His peace of mind? His very life? Ethan's thoughts raced as the man's ultimatum echoed in his mind, his heart thudding louder than ever. Could he truly walk away? Could he live with the knowledge that the answers he sought were within reach, just out of his grasp? His father's secrets were now his own burden to carry, and every step closer to the truth felt like a step closer to danger. As if sensing the turmoil in Ethan's mind, the man took a step forward, his gaze locking onto Ethan's with an intensity that made his stomach churn. "You don't know what they're capable of, do you?" he said softly, almost pitying him. "You think this is all just some conspiracy? It's not. People like them, they've been playing this game for generations. And once you're in it, there's no way out." The words sent a chill through Ethan's veins. He wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely, but his instinct screamed at him that the situation was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. He couldn't trust this man. He couldn't trust anyone anymore. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts, torn between his thirst for the truth and the undeniable fear that gnawed at him. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and for a moment, everything froze. He pulled it out, his hands clammy, and saw the message from Lauren again. It was short, cryptic, just a few words. They know. Stay hidden. Ethan's pulse quickened, his breath catching in his throat. Who knows? Who was Lauren referring to? Was it the people his father had been involved with? Were they finally making their move? The weight of his choices pressed down on him, suffocating him. This wasn't just about uncovering his father's past anymore. This was about survival. His family's survival. And the deeper he dug, the more it became clear that his involvement in this tangled web was no longer a choice. It was inevitable. But the stakes had never been higher. The consequences of each decision felt irreversible. Every path seemed to lead to more danger, more uncertainty. Ethan knew that if he didn't act soon, the people behind all of this would take matters into their own hands. They wouldn't just stop at his father's death. They would finish what they started. The man in front of him seemed to sense Ethan's internal conflict. "You have one last chance, Ethan," he said, his voice a low growl. "Choose wisely. Because if you don't, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Ethan's hands tightened around the wheel, his knuckles white. The world felt as though it was closing in on him, and for the first time in his life, he realized he didn't have all the answers. But one thing was clear. The truth he had been searching for was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined, and the choices he made from this moment forward could change everything, forever. And then, just as his mind was on the brink of shattering from the weight of the decision before him, the sound of tires screeching against the pavement sliced through the silence. A car sped around the corner, its headlights blinding him for a split second. Ethan barely had time to react before the vehicle came to a halt right beside him, blocking his only escape. The door to the car opened, and a shadowy figure stepped out. It was someone he recognized, someone he hadn't seen in years. Someone who shouldn't have been here. And as the figure stepped into the light, Ethan's blood ran cold. His worst fear was realized. The man who stepped out of the car wasn't just a part of the puzzle. He was the final piece. The figure who emerged from the car wasn't just a stranger. He was a ghost from Ethan's past, a name he'd never expected to see again, a face that haunted him in the quietest moments of his life. It was his old partner from college, Luke. They'd been inseparable back then, bound by shared dreams of making it big, of changing the world. They had been like brothers, until the day Luke disappeared without a trace. Ethan had spent years wondering what had happened to him, why he'd left everything behind. And now, here he was, standing in front of him, with a cold smirk that made Ethan's stomach twist. "Luke, what the hell are you doing here?" Ethan's voice trembled, the shock of seeing him almost too much to process. His mind was still reeling from the conversation with his father's former business partner, from the threat, from the message he'd received moments earlier. But now, this was the last thing he'd expected. Luke's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the old, familiar sense of betrayal flood back, a deep-rooted feeling he thought he had buried. "I could ask you the same thing, Ethan. You really thought you were going to uncover all this on your own? You thought you could dig through the lies and come out clean?" His words dripped with sarcasm, but there was something more dangerous lurking behind them. Ethan stepped back, his mind scrambling for answers, for any explanation that made sense. He had trusted Luke, had trusted him more than anyone. But now, standing there, with the realization dawning on him that his old friend was tangled in all of this, the weight of his choices grew heavier.
Why?
"Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse with the flood of emotions rushing through him. "Why did you disappear, and why come back now? What the hell is going on?" Luke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the hood of the car toward Ethan. "It's bigger than you think," he said, his voice quieter now, almost apologetic. "Your father wasn't just involved in some shady business deals. He was in deep, in way over his head. And so are you." Ethan didn't touch the envelope. He couldn't. He felt as if everything he had believed in, everything he had trusted, was slipping through his fingers like sand. The truth was more complicated than he ever could have imagined, and Luke, his closest friend, was now the one telling him that everything he thought he knew was a lie. They've been watching you, Ethan. All of you. They knew you'd start digging sooner or later. They didn't expect you to get this close, though. Luke's words were cold, final, like he was delivering a death sentence. Your father was part of something much larger, something you're not ready for. And now they're coming for you. You're in too deep. Ethan felt the world close in around him. It was as if every single decision he had made, every choice to uncover the truth, to push forward, had led him straight into this trap. He had thought he was just unraveling the mystery of his father's death, but now it was clear. This wasn't just about him. It was about everyone in his life. His family, his friends, his own future.
Who are they?
Ethan demanded, his voice shaking with frustration and fear. Who the hell are these people? And what the hell do you know about all this? Luke glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the street as if he expected someone to jump out from the shadows. I can't tell you everything. I don't have time. But what I can tell you is this. This isn't just about your father anymore. It's about power, about control. The people behind this, they don't just want secrets. They want everything. They want to tear everything down and rebuild it in their image. And you're in the way. Ethan felt his pulse race, the pressure mounting, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He was on the verge of understanding something so much bigger than himself, so much more dangerous than he could have imagined. But the cost of that knowledge, of understanding what his father had really been involved in, was more than he was ready to pay. And Luke, his old friend, was right in the middle of it, and somehow, all of this was connected to the messages, to the threats, to the looming danger that Ethan had been feeling for so long. Then why come back now? Ethan asked, his voice raw with anger. Why warn me if you're part of it all? Luke's lips twisted into a bitter smile. Because I'm not the one who's going to pull you out of this, Ethan. You're on your own. But at least now you know the truth. And you've got a choice. Keep pushing, and you'll lose everything. Or walk away now, and maybe you'll survive. You think you're ready for the next step? You're not. Trust me. Ethan felt the walls closing in. He couldn't breathe. The choices were suffocating him, and Luke's warning felt like a final verdict on the life he had known. The man he had trusted for so long, the one he had confided in, the one he had believed in, was the one who had led him down this dark road. Luke's betrayal was the hardest blow of all, and it left Ethan gasping for air. But the weight of the truth was undeniable. His father's death, the conspiracy, the threats, the lies, it was all bigger than him. Bigger than anything he could have ever imagined. And yet, Ethan knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. Not when the stakes had escalated to this level. Not when the people who had been pulling the strings were closing in. He had to find the truth, even if it meant facing the unimaginable. Just as he opened his mouth to demand more answers, the distant sound of sirens cut through the night, growing louder by the second. And for the first time, Ethan realized that no matter how much he had uncovered, he was still just one step behind. One step behind the people who controlled everything. One step behind the people who had killed his father. And he had no idea how far they would go to make sure their secrets stayed buried. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than ever. And now, Ethan was no longer just fighting for the truth. He was fighting for his life. The air was thick with tension as Ethan stood in front of the abandoned warehouse, his heart pounding in his chest. The truth was within reach, but it felt as though 1,000 invisible forces were pushing against him, threatening to crush everything he had fought for. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to unfold. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered in fragments across months of digging, were finally beginning to come together. But he knew, deep down, that this moment, this confrontation, wasn't just going to be the resolution of his father's mysterious death. It would decide everything. It would decide his life. Ethan had received a message only hours before, an anonymous tip-off that led him here, to this crumbling building on the edge of town. The kind of place no one came to anymore, forgotten by the world. He had followed the trail, the whispers, the threats that had dogged him for so long. Every clue, every dead end, had pointed to this. And now, standing in the shadows of the warehouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous people of all were waiting for him inside, waiting to make sure the truth was buried once and for all. His breath came in shallow gasps as he crept inside, each step echoing in the eerie silence. The dim light from a single overhead bulb flickered, casting long shadows across the room, making every creak and rustle seem louder, more menacing. Ethan's footsteps faltered as he heard a faint voice in the distance, low and indistinct. It was then that he saw him, the man he had been hunting for so long, the one he'd suspected to be behind it all, standing at the far end of the warehouse. Frank Montgomery, his father's business partner, the man who had manipulated everything from the beginning. The man who had orchestrated the lies, the cover-ups, the entire conspiracy. Ethan's pulse quickened, and he stepped forward, his mind racing. Frank's cold eyes met his, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips, as though he had been expecting this moment for years. "I knew you'd come eventually," Frank said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "You always were your father's son, stubborn, relentless, and far too curious for your own good." Ethan's grip tightened around the gun in his hand, the cold metal providing a momentary sense of stability. But deep down, he knew that this wasn't going to be solved with violence. He wasn't here to end Frank's life. He was here to end the lies. He had to know the truth. He had to understand how deep this rabbit hole went.
Why?
Why did you do it? Ethan's voice shook with the force of the question, the anger bubbling up, the hurt, the betrayal. What did you want from my father? Why kill him? Why make me think he died in that crash? Frank's laugh echoed through the dark space, low and chilling. You really think it was about your father?
No, Ethan. It was never about him. It was always about you.
About the power you hold. You don't even realize it, do you? You've been a pawn in a much bigger game. Ethan took a step forward, his pulse pounding in his ears. You killed him because of me? The realization hit him like a freight train. What the hell are you talking about? Frank's eyes glinted with something dark, something that made the hair on the back of Ethan's neck stand up. You think this has just been about your father's death? It's bigger than that. Much bigger. Your father and I weren't just business partners, Ethan. We were part of something that goes back generations. A legacy that has been passed down through the years, hidden in the shadows. Your father found out something he wasn't supposed to. And when he did, he threatened to expose it all. That's when the real danger started. But it wasn't just about him, it was about the control. It was about you, Ethan. The bloodline. You are the key to everything. Ethan felt the world tilt, his thoughts spinning as he processed Frank's words. His mind struggled to grasp the enormity of what was being revealed. He wasn't just some unlucky son who got caught up in a conspiracy. He was the center of it all. His family, his bloodline, had been part of something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. The game had never been about his father. It had been about him all along. Before he could speak, a loud bang echoed through the building, followed by the sound of footsteps. The tension in the room spiked, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It was then that Frank's expression shifted from smugness to something darker, more calculating. The door to the warehouse burst open, and a group of men entered, dressed in black, their faces concealed by masks. They moved quickly, surrounding Ethan and Frank, their weapons drawn. You really thought you could stop this? Frank sneered, stepping back into the shadows, his hands raised in mock surrender. You should have walked away when you had the chance, Ethan. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. This was a trap. He wasn't here to find answers anymore. He was here to survive. Suddenly, there was a sharp noise from behind him, a door slamming open. Ethan's breath caught as he turned to see a familiar figure stepping into the light. His heart stopped. It was Luke. You've been played, Ethan. Luke's voice rang out, cold and distant. Everything you thought you knew, it was all part of the plan. I never left because I wanted to. I left because they forced me to. Ethan's legs felt weak, his breath coming in frantic gasps. Luke, the one person he had trusted above all else, was part of this too. He had been right there the whole time, watching him dig, watching him uncover the truth. And now, here he was, playing his part in a much larger game, one Ethan had never even been close to understanding. The room seemed to close in on him. The walls were pressing in, the stakes higher than ever. His mind screamed for a way out, for an answer, for a way to take back control. But there was no turning back now. The conspiracy had grown too vast, too powerful. And the worst part was, Ethan didn't know who to trust anymore. His own blood had been part of the deception, his best friend had turned on him, and now, he was facing an enemy so entrenched, so dangerous, that he could barely wrap his mind around it. But in that moment, as the men closed in on him and the final pieces of the puzzle slipped into place, Ethan understood one thing with absolute clarity. The fight for the truth wasn't over. Not yet. It was just beginning. And somehow, despite everything, he was going to finish it. The final moments felt like they stretched on for an eternity. Ethan stood in the middle of the warehouse, his breath shallow and ragged, surrounded by enemies, both familiar and unknown. The weight of the situation bore down on him, but there was a strange calm settling over him now. He had been through so much, fought so hard to uncover the truth, and yet, here he was, facing the very people who had orchestrated his father's death, his life's unraveling. His mind raced, but now it wasn't fear that guided him. It was clarity. He knew that everything had led him to this point. The betrayals, the lies, the moments of doubt, all of it had shaped him into the person he needed to be to end this. As the men moved closer, his body tense, ready for whatever came next, Ethan's mind flashed back to everything that had led him here, the unanswered questions, the discoveries, the cryptic messages that had made him question everything about the family he thought he knew. But there was one truth he had always held on to. He was his father's son, and that meant something. His father's fight hadn't been in vain. And now neither would his. In one swift motion, Ethan reached for the device in his pocket, the small recorder that had been his lifeline through all of this. The one thing his father had left behind for him, the last piece of evidence that tied everything together. He had hidden it, safe and sound, away from prying eyes. The sound of Frank's voice taunted him now, his words cutting through the silence, urging Ethan to give up. But the resolve in Ethan's heart burned brighter than ever. He hit play. The recording crackled to life, and for the first time, the pieces fell into place. His father's voice, calm and steady, spoke from beyond the grave, revealing the final truth that had eluded him for so long. Ethan, if you're hearing this, it means the worst has come to pass. I've done everything I can to protect you, but they're too powerful. You'll find the answers, son, but you must know this. You've always been part of a bigger plan. The people behind all of this, they've been watching you your entire life. They think they have control over everything. But you're the key to breaking it. Don't let them win. Ethan felt a weight lift from his chest, not because the war was over, but because he now knew what he had to do. The recording ended, leaving a haunting silence in its wake. But that silence didn't last long. The men around him began to stir, their leader, Frank, snarling in anger. But this time, it wasn't fear that gripped Ethan. This time it was understanding. He wasn't alone in this fight. His father's legacy, his strength, and his spirit had never truly left him. They had always been there, waiting for the right moment to ignite. Ethan raised his head, locking eyes with Frank for the first time without a shred of doubt or hesitation. "It's over, Frank," he said, his voice low but steady. "You can't keep running the game anymore. The truth is out. And no matter what happens, I'll make sure it stays that way." The men closed in, but just as the tension reached its peak, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Police lights flashed through the grimy windows, the sound of approaching footsteps growing louder. Frank's face contorted with panic, his plans unraveling as quickly as they had been put together. "You think you've won, don't you?" he hissed, his voice filled with venom. But Ethan just watched as the authorities stormed the building, his heart racing, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense that the battle was finally over. It didn't end with violence or a grand fight. It ended with truth. The conspiracy that had held his family, his life, in its grip for so long, was crumbling. Ethan wasn't just the son of a man who had died. He was a man who had fought for the future, for justice. The police quickly apprehended the men in the warehouse, but Frank was gone. The ring of criminals he had been part of was larger than anyone had suspected. But the damage was done. The truth would not be buried again. The aftermath was surreal. Ethan had his life back, but it would never be the same. His father's name was cleared. His legacy, once tainted by lies and deceit, would now be remembered for the courage and determination it had taken to fight against a system so deeply entrenched in corruption. Yet as the days passed, as the weight of what had transpired settled into the silence of his everyday life, a nagging feeling lingered. The truth had come out, but had it really? Was Frank truly gone, or had he merely disappeared into the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again? Ethan stood alone, staring out the window of his father's office. The city stretched out before him, unaware of the storm that had just passed. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. But it wasn't the peace of a victory. It was the peace of knowing he had done the right thing. The peace of knowing the truth had been set free. And for Ethan, that was enough.
For now.
As he turned to leave, the screen faded to black. But the final moments, the lingering feeling in the air, suggested something else. A quiet whisper, a reminder that some mysteries never truly close, they simply wait. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning.